I'm ready to get it on the road, in space, in another dimension. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to your very first podcast episode of year 2021. We're still here. COVID is losing to us, human beings. And to celebrate this new season of the Bedroom Super Producer podcast, BK, I would like to greet you with a warm welcome.
Well, thank you.
Wish you all the best musically, creatively, and personally.
Well, thank you. The same to you, my friend. The same to you.
And to inspire people in this brand new year, we're going to segue from the last episode where we talked about Dr. Dre. And we both thought it would be a great idea to talk about one of his most precious collaborators.
Yes, indeed. This week on the podcast, I think it's a great pleasure for us to talk about the one and the only Scott Storch.
Ooh, Scotty.
Yeah, Scotty. And we're going to dig deep into his life. Superstar, producer, all the way from Dr. Dre, from his humble beginnings with The Roots, and talk about his career and all the numerous hits that he's done over probably the last 20 years.
20 some odd years. Yeah, I gotta say, Scott is probably my number 3. So he's definitely on my Mount Rushmore of hip-hop producers behind Dre, Timbo. I don't know who number 4 is, but number 3 is definitely Mr. Piano Man.
Yeah,
Scott
Mr.
Storch.
Piano Man, as Timberland used to call him. And yeah, I have to admit, he's one of the top up there with the long list of people that we respect in this industry. And I think for me, one of the thing that strikes me the most about like his talent is it's his own style. It's you can't see like if he's been influenced by anything or whatever. I think he's learned from everywhere, but when you hear one of his tracks, you know it has a special sound. If you compare to other producers, let's say Timberland and Dr. Dre and everything, I think one of his strengths is he's really able to tailor his sound to really like a broad range of artists. And we really see that in his discography with all the numerous people that he's worked with.
Absolutely. I think that stems from the fact that he actually writes everything that he produces, meaning that he doesn't really loop samples or, replay stuff from like cover stuff, or he really has a knack for coming up with his own chord progressions, melodies. His sound is really him speaking through his music. You can absolutely tell from those chords and types of melodies that it was written by Scott Storch and no one else.
And I think one of the things that separates him from other people also is that contrary to like other like trained musicians and piano people and orchestral people, I think he was one of the first producer to identify that to be able to tailor to urban hip hop, whatever, trap, whatever you want to call it. He started from chords and a song structure, but he was always able to tone it down and to really find that little loop, that little melodies, those little 4 notes that would make the song really catchy and that people would be able to listen over and over again, instead of going all out and always having these super complex chords and super complex chord progressions. So he was always able to, in a way, like dumb things down for it to be like even more like poppy and even more catchy.
Yeah, and that's a testament to his genius because, even at that time when he first started to become his own like superstar producer without collaborating with Timbo or Dr. Dre, I always felt like he underproduced, And looking back, you're absolutely right. I mean, he understood very quickly that he had to let the artist shine, and he was playing a supporting role almost to those artists. So I mean, and that's a very difficult thing to do. I mean, at least from what I learned on my own journey, this whole less is more thing with music is kind of difficult because you always feel vulnerable. You always feel like you might have left out your best idea somehow. And so, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners will agree that it's difficult to know when something is A, very simple, and yet B, complete and completed.
Sometimes you feel that it's a little bit too simple, that it needs something extra, and it's at the right place, and sometimes it's just not there. That's the difficult parts of producing. Always knowing when is it enough. You never know if it's like that sweet spot is the holy grail of producing.
Absolutely. So let's trace back Scott's journey in the music industry, and you talked about it in the intro. He started out as a keyboard player for The Roots, the Philadelphia hip-hop group. Fun story, I was a huge fan of The Roots at the end of the 90s, and I had actually bought Do You Want More, their second album, I believe. And it's a really, really jazzy album, very deep, very complex in the chord progressions and all of that. And I had no idea that most of that music had actually been written by Scott Storch himself.
Yeah, indeed. I kind of got into Scott a little bit later. Well, I think I already knew of him, but he wasn't with The Roots anymore. I discovered him with You Got Me, with Erykah Badu and Eve.
I guess he was on the way out, yeah. I guess he didn't tour with them anymore.
Yeah,
so.
I think he was already out when Questlove heard You Got Me, that was originally written for Jill Scott. He absolutely wanted it on the album. I think that's how it went.
Didn't they get a Grammy for that?
Yeah, he got a Grammy. I think I saw an interview. He said he didn't even go to the Grammy Awards, but he got a Grammy, and he said it.
He decided to party with Paris and Miami instead.
I don't know. I think that was later.
My bad, Scott. If you're listening to the podcast.
Yeah, but still, if we go back to what you were saying, for him to go from skipping school and hanging in downtown Philly and 15, 16 years old and becoming one of the first musicians for The Roots, it's pretty incredible though. Back then they weren't even called The Roots. I think they were called the Square Roots or something. So yeah,
I didn't know that.
So
interesting.
Yeah,
Scott Storch is a very humble guy, but you could tell that he had a vision for himself. And so rapidly after The Roots, he got in contact with Dre, obviously. I guess it was in 98 or 99.
Yeah, 99, I think. 98, 99. I think he got in contact with Dre through Eve. I think Eve introduced him to Dr. Dre. And I think that people think that he started working with Dre on the new Dr. Dre album that we covered on the last podcast. But I think the first track that he did was actually a song for Eminem, right?
Was it on the Marshall Mathers LP?
I think so.
It was just the two of us, wasn't that the one?
I don't know the song, but I think I listened to an interview or something. He said it was a track for Eminem that he did.
Yeah, I think so. And then obviously came his biggest hits in 99 off of the legendary album 2001 by Dr. Dre.
Yeah.
He you gotta again give it to Scott Storch for being so humble, because even though nowadays everybody knows he's the guy behind the infamous Still DRE piano lick, for the best of the first 10 to 15 years, people were like, this is Dr. Dre.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so, but when you hear the piano and then the motif, Yamaha motif strings, you could already tell that the bulk of the songwriting or the music writing on this song was really just Scott Storch. He wouldn't have come up with those kinds of drums, but the rest is really, really just a Scott Storch beat.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
And for those gearhead, I think it was that lick was written on a Korg tritone, those infamous workstations.
oh yeah, you don't think it was a motif?
No, he says in an interview that it was a Korg tritone, like the original piano preset on the Korg,
Ah,
that they just
interesting.
like compressed or something and like removed, I think, the low end or something. That's what he says.
Yeah, because when you listen to it, it certainly doesn't sound like a regular workstation patch. Yeah, but then again, it's a testament to Dr. Dre's ear for mixing, I guess.
Yeah, indeed. I think they EQ'd the hell out of it, compressed it or something, did something to it, and because it doesn't sound like a regular piano, like a normal piano either, but it has this it's very distinct voicing to it.
So then let's talk about his early 2000 string of hits, because once he got his name out there after 2001, I'd say around 2003, 2002, 2003, he really started to put those hits out there.
Mm. Well, I think it, like you said at the beginning, he really kind of had a vision. From the moment when he was in the Roots, at some point he realized that he didn't want to be just called the keyboard player from the Roots, so he decided to go on his own, produce some stuff. Like his name got a little bit bigger, then went on to produce with Dr. Dre, and then again same thing happened. He didn't want to get stuck into the ghost producer for Dr. Dre, right? So I think that was like when the whole 2000 era started, that I think he moved back to Florida because he had moved from Philly to LA to work with Dre. And then he went back to Florida and then started his whole journey of like making a name for himself and working with some of the biggest names out there, just he worked with Beyonce, he worked with Pink, he worked with Christina Aguilera, so the Fat Joes and all. So it was a pretty good period for him.
For sure. For me, it really started with the stuff he did with Beyonce. I think that Baby Boy.
Yeah, her first
Me, Myself, and
album,
I.
right? Her first album for
Yeah.
like as a solo artist.
And then Naughty Girl. Those three are really like, even to this day,
Yeah.
you'll hear those songs on a dance floor when the DJ needs to get the ladies involved. You'll hear one of those. Not Me, Myself, and I, because I think that's a slow ballad, but those two.
But the like Baby Boy, that's one that keeps on coming back up. Like I think Baby Boy or Can't Hold Us Down, Christina. That's those were big hits. Like one of the ones that I loved were I think two songs. I think that were like his. Well, actually three from Fat Joe. I think it's a pretty kick-ass song. But also in terms of like musicianship and arrangement, I think that track from Mario, the "Let Me Love You" one, that's a pretty well balanced, well arranged track. I think. I don't know what you think.
Well, I mean, it's still on my Spotify R&B playlist.
There you go, the "Let's Make Love" playlist.
It's just such an easy listen.
Yeah, everything is like perfectly EQ'd. It sounds great even today.
And I think it has that little whistle synth lead from the motif also during the chorus, doesn't it?
Yeah, lots of sound that we associate with those workstation from the 2000s.
But yeah, I mean, obviously around 2004 when he or should I say Fat Joe released Lean Back, you could absolutely tell that Scott Storch was experimenting with those Arabic scales and instrumentation. Did you ever have the feeling that he kind of ripped off the Timbaland aesthetics with that? Or did you think you never really associated his kind of stay with Timbaland and then branching off with his own style or of a kind of ethnic hip hop production.
They had produced together.
Well,
When
that's
was like Crimea River? When was that? Crimea River,
so,
2004,
2002.
2002.
2002.
So he had
So it
worked
was
with
really
Timbo.
at the beginning. It was really at the beginning of his kind of solo stint, if you will.
Exactly. That's when he was in Florida. So if in 2002 he'd worked with Timbo, it's kind of normal to think that he was sort of influenced. I don't think he was the only producer using those Arabic kind of scales, whatever. And I think Scott, one of the things he would, since he was not a purist, but I think he was always getting inspired from like different places. And since hip hop and all these genres were oriented towards sampling and everything, so he would always, I think, try to replay those little samples or like where would they come from. And I think combine that with the fact that he had worked with Timbo, yeah, of course you're gonna hear that a little bit of that influence in the stuff that he did later on, like for Lean Back and everything. So because he's very like he's not very he has a style of his own. That's one of the things that I like about Scott. It's not a classically trained pianist. It's not like a beat maker pianist, but he's like in between. He knows the chords. He knows in what he's playing, but he's kind of the way he plays. It's kind of as if he was playing on an MPC, but he's on keyboards. So you know.
Yeah, for sure. There's definitely a unique technique.
Yeah.
The rhythmic approach to his keyboard playing is kind of unique.
Exactly.
But yeah, I always felt that the beef between Timbaland and Scott stemmed from him kind of taking his style and doing it better, quote unquote. You know, because Timbaland never had those pop hits the way Scott did. You know, and I think they.
Do you think it was really a big beef? I don't think it was. I think it was probably a little bit. It was a little bit made up. It was stuff that it would, you know, it sold records, it sold stories, it sold newspapers. I'm not sure it was. Maybe there was a little bit of a something, but sometimes I think it was a little bit like promotional for, like someone said something to Scott and some other person told something to Timbo and. Like, you know, I'm not sure it was.
Yeah, well,
I'm sure today
sure.
they talk and there's nothing. I'm sure there's.
Well, they had studio sessions not so long ago, so obviously the beef is squashed.
Yeah,
but
so I'm not. I don't know. You think it was like a real thing that they hated each other? I'm not sure about that. I think it was just gossip.
Well, I mean, yeah, it was obviously people getting in their ears. But I mean, at that time, also Timbaland was coming into his own superstardom era. Obviously, because 2006 he released Shock Value, his first and most successful, arguably, project ever. And at the same time, Timbaland in those years, I don't know if you remember during the interviews, he was so not humble. It was almost
cocky.
difficult to hear.
Yeah, it was very cocky. Yeah.
I mean, I was the biggest fan in the world, and at that time, I was like, I stopped following him on Instagram, stopped really listening to his new releases because I was like, kind of, you know, when you
it's too much.
Obviously, I never met him, but sometimes you meet your hero in person and you're disappointed. That's how I felt. Like I was like, I love the guy's music, but as a person, he's just.
Well, he was playing up his persona. You know, he was.
Yeah, I guess he believed the hype. He
believed he was the best there is, and you kind of have to have that attitude if you want to keep evolving and keep like if you want people to see you as the best and always call you back for their project and everything, you have to kind of show off in that way. But you're right that at some point, like it happened to me too, it kind of gets old and you're like, well, you know, keep making the music. I don't have to I don't have to hear you bragging about it. So I totally understand your point of view.
Yeah. And then in what was it, like 2005 he got together with 50, or 2006 actually. No,
Candy
I'm trying
Shop.
to look at my
It's 2005.
2005.
It's 2005.
Yeah. So I think, to me, Candy Shop and before that Lean Back were his biggest hip hop hits. You could tell that the beats were kind of produced around the same time,
I think
because of the
they were produced. I think even like the same day or
yeah, they
the same
might
week.
have been.
Because like
They might
Candy
have been
Shop and
because
Just a
it's
Little Bit sound very, very much the same. No?
yeah. Yeah, I know. Fun fact about that: around that same time, I had bought some floppy disks for my MPC. I don't know if you remember that. They were the white little discs, and one of the collections was Neptunian drums.
Yeah. I think I still have
You,
them.
well,
I think I still have
the
them.
drums from Candy Shop and Leanback were from those
Oh yeah,
MPC
nice.
floppy disks.
Neptunian drums. Wow, I remember
Yeah,
those. They were
yeah.
pretty good drums.
From a website that still exists.
Yeah.
I had a look lately, modernsounds.net or .com.
Nice.
Sounds with a Z. And
Uh,
at that time they were the Splice of that era.
yeah,
You know, you
exactly.
could buy guitar loops, string loops, and the production was
That was pretty good.
above average, like not average, but way above the competition.
Oh yeah, I remember
And
those
so
Neptunian drums. I think those were the first drums I always loaded up when I turned on the MPC.
yeah, sound
Yeah.
design was
Oh yeah.
really, really very
Well
high
done.
quality.
Yeah,
Yeah.
indeed.
And I had gotten those off of the Source magazine.
Mhm.
You, yeah,
I remember
you know,
that.
at the end of the magazines, you had like those tiny little ads,
Hmm.
and I was always trying to figure out where the superstar producers got their drums, and one of them was Scott Storch, and they got him off the same
Hmm.
source as I did.
Oh, interesting. But you're right. Like 2005 was like a big year for him, I think, because besides the 50 cents stuff, I think one of the stuff that I really enjoyed from Scott was I think there was two other tracks that year that I loved. I think it was the introduction to Chris Brown. So "Run It" for me was incredible. Like
For sure.
the danceability and the way it was mixed and the impact of the silence in that song. It's incredible. There's not too much stuff. It's perfect for like pop and routines and everything. It's exactly what Chris Brown would have required. And also Players Only, Arkel with the game, that track. Wow. Incredible track. Remember that track?
For sure.
Wow.
Yeah. And I
Oy,
mean,
oy, oy.
nobody else can really brag about producing a song for Kells. You know,
Mm,
he doesn't, or he didn't prior to that go out and scout other producers for his lead singles. But
mm.
he did it with Scott Storch. So
Yeah, of
that was,
course. Mm,
I mean, nowadays you can't even really pronounce the name R. Kelly, but
mm,
I mean, at that time he was obviously the biggest R&B star, and he was one, if not the biggest producer of
yeah.
R&B. So
No, but
for
like
him to
I think in 2004, 2005, I think it was probably his biggest year, maybe with including 2006. I think there were like lineups of stars at his studios, like waiting to have their 3 hour sessions or 4 hour sessions. I think, I
well,
think
that's
I,
what he said, didn't he?
yeah, I think I heard an interview where he said that he had bought a Ferrari and he would just never drive it. It was just in the parking. He said that
Yeah, I heard that.
he would come down and he would just look at it and like because he was always working and people were waiting to work with him all day, so he was working. So no time to drive the Ferrari. So, but still,
Imagine that.
but when you look at his discography, you realize why he was always working. He produced pretty much everyone that was anyone at that time, he produced. And maybe you're all right. Maybe Timbo was a little bit jealous. Maybe he was, because Timbo's style was so special and so different, and it makes him who he is today. But it wasn't quite as like the Scott found that pop formula to like to keep it urban, but to mash it up with a Beyonce, to be able to make a track with Christina Aguilera, to make a track with Pink. And I think Timbaland never got exactly at the spot where, like, yes, he produced for Bjork, and he produced for Madonna, and he produced for all these important artists. But I think Scott found he was able to find a better synergy of his music with the artist. I don't know if that makes sense.
Absolutely. I think that Scott not trying to have a verse and then do like the little ad libs behind the artist played a factor. Scott never tried to be an artist. He was absolutely aware that his role was to support the artist musically. And in that sense, it made him somewhat of a better producer, at least in that era. He doesn't necessarily have that true originality that Timbo displays from time to time. Like, absolutely alone in his own universe. Like, I mean, Scott has more of a clean, polished, safe approach when he does pop, R&B, and even hip hop, you know? He doesn't take like huge risks in terms of melody, harmonization, or anything like that. So, and that's probably because he's a piano player, so it needs to make sense musically, you know. But well, they're both beasts, so it's not. But yeah, I'm looking at his year 2003, and like he had all of the Beyonce singles. He had the first Ja Rule single. He had the first Loon single, the first G Unit single. It was just crazy. And like basically, if you went to Scott Storch, whatever he produced for you in that time period was your lead single.
Yeah, you knew it was gonna be a hit. So immediately.
And then 2004, you've got Jadakiss, who had his first single with him. You had Terror Squad with Lean Back. Mm-hmm. The Roots single, The Tipping Point.
Yeah, that song, like Don't Say Nothing.
Don't Say Nothing.
That exactly. Track, I still listen to that today. It's an awesome track. I think one of my favorites from Scott.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, it was so good. I was like, it kind of sounds like Dr. Dre, but it's the Roots, and they don't have external producers. So what happened there? Come to find out, it was Scott Storch.
Exactly. So it's funny how it took Scott to work with the Roots, but the fact that he had worked with them and then he kept on producing for them afterwards, for the Roots to have that, they started to have that sort of West Coast, that edginess. They started to get it, because before that, at the beginning, the Roots, it was very like not new jazz, but like neo jazz, very lyrical, poetic stuff, you know?
But very, not very as organic. Catchy as neo soul.
Exactly. Yeah, but like kind of like weird stuff. And then as they moved along, and like 2003, 2004, like they worked with Scott again and again, and they started to hammer out stuff like Don't Say Nothing, and you were like, whoa, that's different. It's very, very urban, very kind of dark, and I think it made them a better band. They kind of like I think not exploded, but their style became a little bit more. I liked the way where they were going when they started to get produced and become a little bit more urban, less like poetry and less lyrical and less stuff, you know?
Yeah, well, they had boxed themselves into that we're a band aesthetic, where basically all of the parts in a beat would have to be played live. Therefore, they wouldn't really go outside of the band formula, and that kind of hurt them, especially where the urban landscape was going. Where the orchestrations, the Scott Storch sound basically was way bigger, more instrumentation, more complex, more produced essentially, and then they were going out there with one bass line and one Rhodes keyboard track and Questlove's drum, and that was it. So it kind of missed those colors and textures that modern production had to
Mhm. Well, it worked.
could bring to the table.
It worked in 97, 98, right? The beginning of the 2000s. But in 2002, 2003, it needed to evolve a little bit more. So, after 2001, the Dr. Dre album, and like the sound was becoming bigger and bigger, and the landscape was kind of changing of the urban style. And I think like Scott made them a little bit better and more like in the period where they were. I think they kind of learned because basically Scott produced this stuff, but then afterwards they would usually replay everything.
So we had tremendous snowfall here in Montreal, and apologies for the sirens in the background if you hear. Do you think we should take a tiny break, BK, or
No, no,
can
no.
you hear him? Can you hear
I don't
him through
even hear
my
them. And
microphone?
it's part of the show, man. It's the way it is.
The grit. But yeah, I mean, I think you're right that Scott Storch brought true musicianship to hip hop, and therefore he kind of changed the game from that aspect. You kind of had to learn how to play keys from then on, because as sampling was more and more difficult to integrate into a project, playing keyboards was more and more became more interesting from a business standpoint, because then you didn't have to give all your publishing away to some obscure 1965 artist that you sampled.
And you could write the music together with the musician in front of you and to see what works, what doesn't work, like the way you're usually supposed to do it.
So let's talk about the Scott Storch sound from a technical perspective. What can you tell us about what you know of how Mr. Storch puts his beats together?
Well, he started at the beginning, so there's not that much information out there to how he does it, except the fact that we always see him playing piano in his videos. But I think since he was from, we could call it old school, because he started around 94, 95, 96. So it was probably oriented around some type of keyboard, one of those workstation, let's say a Yamaha Motif back in the days, Korg Triton, and probably an MPC for the beat parts, and then just around a Pro Tool rig of some sort. I don't think he's ever. I think one of the things that I like about him is that he doesn't talk gear that much. I don't know if you've noticed that. He's always more about the feel with the artist, and maybe the type of sound that he wants. I know that one of the things that helped him when he started playing with the Roots is the fact that he was playing a Fender Rhodes when everyone wanted a synthesizer, right? And that's like one of the things that the Roots wanted, to have like kind of this vintage sound. So that's pretty much all I know. What about you? What did your research brought up about the sounds that he
I mean, in the golden era, so probably from 2002 to 2007, 8 ish. I think you're right. It was mainly an MPC for the drums, and then either a Korg Triton or a motif for all the bulk of the instruments. Sometimes you would hear, a live bass line or some live guitars. Let's say on the Mario stuff, I think there are some, but it was really all about the motif. For me, you bought a motif and you could probably replay 98% of Scott Storch's catalog.
True. I agree with that.
And to me, that's one thing. If I had been able to talk to Scott Storch, that's the only thing I would have mentioned, is the fact that he had the resources and the opportunities to get a real piano in there, to get a real string section in there. And sometimes I feel like he kind of shortchanged himself by not caring too much about the production aspect and the types of instruments he brought in. Like, this guy could actually write symphonies if he wanted to, but and he kind of did, but with kind of cheap sounding workstation instruments. You know what I mean? And that to me kind of makes his catalog a little bit dated in a way. Certain pop pieces he did for Pink, for example, and for Christina Aguilera, like he did these power ballads, but with the same motif, like tired old sounds. And I felt like he could have made all of his productions more grandiose and expensive sounding by using better sources for his sounds. So,
but at the same time, he has, I think, he really wanted to. I think he focused more on, like I said earlier, the artist, and to make something tailor made for them, especially. And at the end of the day, they were gonna shine. And also, I think he was just like kind of like spitting out verses. He was just putting them tracks out there. And I think he wouldn't have produced as much stuff as he did if he had taken time to have special string arrangements and looked for days and days for different drums. I think we talked about that with Dr. Dre. I think Dr. Dre would have a much, much bigger catalog if he hadn't been always focused on reinventing everything that he did on every single album, right? And Scott did just that. He just used the tools that he had, the best tools that he had, the best way he knew how to, and he made way, way, way more tracks. So it depends how you see it. You could say you should have probably orchestrated better or used a live orchestra here or maybe a live bass here, but that takes time, and sometimes maybe it can play against you. Maybe you lose the creative flow. Maybe I think the one of the good thing about workstations is that everything is there. You click on a button, poof, you've got your orchestra. You click on a button, poof, you've got your piano. Poof, it just so in terms of creative workflow, you just do it, you do it, you do it. And even today with computers, when you're loading this huge orchestral patch and you know something about it, it takes a little bit of time. It takes that 2-3 seconds. You don't have that on the workstation. It's there instantaneously. So maybe the sounds are like less good, like you said. Maybe he shortchanged himself in terms of the timeless aspect of all these songs, and you realize that it comes all from the same keyboard. But I think it's kind of a balance. Do you want to create a lot of songs, or do you want to have less songs but better produced? And since you never know before creating the track that it's going to be a hit, I don't know. Do you really want to take the time to have everything orchestrated and work with an arranger and everything for something that so I don't know. I think both opinions have merit here.
Yeah, you make great points, because obviously we would have probably wanted 60 more bangers from Dr. Dre, whereas Scott Storch gave them to us. But then again, if you listen to Cry Me a River with the live string section and the real rows and all of that, you're like, maybe I wish Scott and Timbo did 30 more of those. You know what I mean? Because Cry Me a River sounds extremely rich in 2021, whereas Gimme That by Chris Brown is kind of, well, that was that era kind of thing, you know what I mean? So, but moving on to the new era, because the whole he spent 100 million on partying and all of that has been talked about so much that I didn't really want to talk about it in this podcast with you. And I'm sure you won't mind that.
Not at all. Like I said, it's like you said, it's been publicized enough. We can talk about the good music he made instead.
Yeah. And I mean, to that point that we made earlier about his production techniques, I think that this is really starting to change with the new Scott Storch. Like, I'm looking at his Instagram and all of that, and he seems to be much more aware that the tools that he uses to make the beats count, and they are very much part of the flavor that he brings to the artists. And now you see him, with the Moog 1. You see him with what's that huge Korg workstation? Is that the Kronos?
Yeah, I think Kronos. Yeah,
yeah.
with
He has
Kronos
that.
with a K, I think. Yeah.
And then you can absolutely tell that he understands where the game is at in terms of creating your own samples. Using the RC20 on your keyboard parts to make them sound a certain way.
Yeah, even with the plugin stuff, I've seen him use a lot of native instrument stuff. He has one of those big complete keyboards. Also, I've even seen videos where he uses Serum to create stuff. So yeah, like you said, I think he's moving on, and he's like becoming a better him, and learning more of the tools, and still smoking those joints while he's doing it, but
Yeah. And by the way, Mr. Storch, weed is a drug. So stop saying that you're sober. If you smoke 3 joints an hour, you're not sober. That's all I have to say about that.
Yeah, but cocaine is a hell of a drug.
Yeah, maybe. I'm not gonna.
Let's not go there.
I'm not gonna say more. Yeah, exactly.
Let's not go there. One of the things that I like about the new Scott Storch is that I look at all the tracks that he's been producing, and I don't know any names. And at first I was like, okay, that's kind of weird. How come I don't know anyone? Well, there's the occasional Fat Joe and Chris Brown in there, and then I realized that they're all like newcomers, right? And I think that's one of the cool thing that he's doing, like producing again and like being like from the old school and doing stuff, is that he's really trying to push new artists and to showcase new artists to people. And I think that's something that not that many producers do as they grow older, as they have a pretty sensible sized catalog. They want to make the next big hit with the Beyonce. They want to make the next big thing with the Justin Timberlake. And he's kind of doing the opposite. I think his whole ordeal kind of, I don't know, he's more humble. He knows that it's not all about the Ferraris and the yachts and everything. And he's getting back slowly into producing and everything, and trying to get the attention on newer artists and younger artists, and to promote them with his music.
You said obviously I didn't either know people like Russ and Trippie Redd and whoever else I did know who 6ix9ine was, maybe not for the right reasons, but one thing's for sure, he was able to become relevant again. And in an industry like the American modern pop and urban music business, it's extremely difficult. Once you kind of fell to the wayside, it's very, very difficult to go back into the limelight. And I feel like Scott Storch is kind of able to do it right now. Whereas, a guy like Timbaland doesn't really put out like great songs with highly relevant artists. Not that I know of, at least. And so maybe he's focusing on other stuff. But I really have the feeling like Scott Storch jumped right back in the mix. And to me, this is sheer talent. You know what I mean? Like he was able in a second to pick up that new thing that was trap, understand how the music is written, understand how the music is produced, understand who is coming up, and like basically getting in the studio with the right newcomers that had talent and drive, connect with them, write great music with them. And so it's really a beautiful thing, and it's really a story of reinvention and what's the word I'm looking for? Redemption. Like it's really awesome. He was one of our heroes for sure. And when like 2010 came, when he lost the diss battle with Timbaland, you kind of felt like, this is truly over for Scott. He had a great run, but he's done. But then 8 years later, 2018, he's back at it. He's doing great stuff. He's and sometimes you'll see producers try to emulate and understand the new styles, and they're just not able to. You change the tempo, you change the production style or the techniques, and it's over. But in a case of Scott Storch, he turned it around in a spectacular fashion, and here we are. And he's basically one of the biggest names again in the hip hop genre. So that's really beautiful. Obviously, we won't really talk about his EDM days because that didn't really happen, and it didn't really sound how it was supposed to sound. But yeah, so that's that. It's also a good way to illustrate just how talented all these young EDM producers are. Because you can't just say I'm going to do EDM, and 12 months later you're able to
different.
produce
on
totally, that level.
Yeah, it's totally different.
It's a lot more of learning if you want to do EDM than if you want to do trap, for example. So
exactly, yeah, it's a.
But yeah, I mean, if kids out there listening to the podcast don't know who Scott Storch is, or maybe they know the new Scott Storch, but they don't know exactly just how big Scott Storch was, give us a few of your favorite all-time Scott Storch produced joints, BK.
I have a lot, but I can focus on a couple. For me, all-time great, of course, You Got Me by The Roots. That's an all-time classic. Go back to that and you can see his talent. What else? Cry Me a River, not that bad. Grammy nominated, Grammy winning song, I think. Else, The Roots that I really, really like, the tempo and the swing. Don't Say Nothing by The Roots. That's a good one. And he's done so many great stuff. Run It, Chris Brown, that's also pretty awesome. And I think one of my favorites, Players Only, featuring The Game, R. Kelly. I'm gonna be controversial today.
Well, I mean, it's a very good song.
Yeah.
Okay, so my turn. So yeah, I mean, I always had this thing for "Give Me That" by Chris Brown, just because of if it would have been produced again. Going back to my point, if those solo strings would have been a real quartet, that would have been epic. Then you've got some unreleased stuff. For example, I'm gonna have to Google this one, but he produced this incredible song for Busta Rhymes. that wasn't released. The name is "I'll Hurt You." So Google YouTube that song, and Busta Rhymes has this stellar lyrical performance on that song. And again, it just goes to show that if he had gotten some real strings player on that song, it would have been crazy, crazy. And then there was this one Nelly joint. I just gotta
Clap Back. No, Clap Back was Ja Rule.
It's pretty good.
Get It Poppin' with Fat Joe.
Yeah, Fat Joe.
Yeah.
It was featuring Nelly.
Yeah, featuring Nelly.
Yeah, Get It Poppin'.
I like it. I like that one. Yeah.
Like the production was just kind of flawless on that one. Like the colors and the textures, everything came together, and it really felt full. And so Get It Poppin', really, really cool joint. So that would be my flavors of the day for people wanting to learn who the real Scott Storch is. And so on this note, I wish everybody out there a safe and super creative 2021. And BK, I'll let it to you to take it away.
Well, yeah, I hope this was entertaining for you guys. I hope you discovered a great producer, get inspired by him, get inspired by his track, his journey, his work ethic. And on this, wishing you a great week, great producing. And we'll see you guys next time on the podcast. Peace out.
Peace.
Thanks for listening to the podcast, guys. Remember to subscribe if you like what you hear. We're on Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube. Also, if you want to support us, head on to delicatebeats.com. You can find our serum packs, our contact instruments, and also plenty of freebies if you subscribe to the newsletter. Don't forget to follow us on social media, Instagram, Facebook, and once again, keep making that awesome music.